Just because Iraq was criticized widely for its use of chemical weapons doesn't mean Iran will get off easy either. The Iranian military, of course, used human wave tactics in Operation Ramadan and many other sectors, and infamously used child soldiers. So yeah, you could probably imagine that being a child within the state of Iran being thrown into a modern World War I type of war where basically nothing happened because both sides threw so much shit at each other that nothing came of it. Yeah, extremely depressing. Oh yeah, mentioning World War I, yeah, this was basically modern World War I, which means yes, both sides were effectively using large trench networks, bayonet charges, machine gun nests, you know, the typical tactics used in 1914 that were being...
Imagine doing a bayonet charge in 1984 or like 1985 or something.
Actively used in the 1980s.
That's
As you
nuts.
could probably imagine, 8 years of this kind of combat would lead to this many dead. Now this of course leads into the spiciest part of discussing the war, and that was the huge amount of foreign support given to both sides.
I asked the Iraqi foreign minister what he had to say to the big powers.
There is one thing that we would like to say to the big powers. That is not to interfere in the area in any way, to keep away. Not to interfere directly or indirectly. This has been always what we wanted from the big powers.
Are you confident that Iraq and the smaller Arab countries in the Gulf will be able, though, to maintain security for what are, after all, vital interests, vital economic interests for the West?
Yes, definitely. After all, who is threatening our independence? If it is a country in the region, we should be able to deal with that. But if it is a big power coming and interfering in the area, then the other big power would use that as a pretext for its own interference, and we get in the vicious circle.
Most countries, including the United States and the Soviet Union, sought to support Iraq because they viewed Saddam Hussein's government as a good counterbalance to Iran's revolution. As a result of this, states...
I was going to say, it's like, you know, choosing between the two, just purely from a postmodern, zero-sum game frame of mind. Like, I understand why Westerners would support a at least semi-secular, authoritarian government over a radical Islamic state, especially given that they were such close supporters and allies of the Shah. Like that makes sense. But then, in hindsight, you go, ooh, it's the same thing. It's every freaking time that outsiders get involved in conflicts in the Middle East, you end up like training or creating enemies, 15 years down the road, right? Like look at when the Soviet Union was fighting a war with Afghanistan, and hush hush, Americans went in and trained the Mujahideen, and then you're like, oh, who's this Osama bin Laden guy? It's like, oh yeah, we might have helped teach him a few things, and that's not great, So then you have these radical groups that learn tactics and learn or get equipment that they otherwise would have never had, and then you end up fighting them like 15 years later. It's such a, people say like, oh, the greatest blunder ever that you could do is, get involved in a land war in Asia, or get involved in a land war into Russia when winter's approaching, right? General Winter, that whole deal. But at least with the 20th century, I think has taught us, the second half of the 20th century, and certainly the first, so far the first quarter of the 21st century is, Middle Eastern wars suck for everybody, and they're a complete waste of time and lives and money and resources, and all you do is fight for 20-something years and you replace the Taliban with the Taliban.
Like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Kuwait gave Saddam's government billions of dollars in loans. The United States, on the other hand, is a little bit more complicated because despite giving Iraq billions of dollars in economic aid, as well as military intelligence and also some dual-use technology, it's kind of pulled a little bit of a sneaky one with the Iran-Contra affair.
Let's start with the part that is the most controversial.
I forgot about
A few months ago, I
Iran-Contra.
told the American people I did not trade arms for hostages.
I think it was, they were kept for like, it was a repeating number. I think it was 333 days, something like that. Because I don't think it was quite a year, for the embassy at least, during the, this period.
My heart and my best intentions still tell me that's true.
And yeah,
But the
Iran-Contra.
facts and the evidence tell me it is not.
Yeah.
Bitch, what? You see, the Reagan administration not only was backing Saddam Hussein, but was also secretly selling weapons to the Iranian government. To those of you who need the background on this one, the country of Iran was subject to an arms embargo by the United States at the time. In 1979, Iranian students stormed the US embassy in Tehran and took 52 Americans hostage.
Yep.
After this had happened, the president at the time, Jimmy Carter, imposed an arms embargo.
One of the probably best human beings to ever hold the office, but probably bottom 5 all-time policy-wise, Jimmy Carter. Like, I believe that he had a heart of gold. I mean, living today in 2025, just the concept of giving up personal property and personal ownership in a company of a peanut farm, right? He gave it up because he did not want to even create the potential of trying to serve himself or help himself in any way when he was holding office. And that just is not the case anymore. His situation was, it's a little bit different, but nowadays as soon as politicians get out, it's a revolving door into Fortune 500 companies sitting on boards of, Fortune 500 companies, Fortune 100 companies even. And, they get kickbacks through, here's a book deal. Yep, I got paid, $16 million for this book deal. And it's just like money in politics has completely changed, like, our conception of everything. And just the way that America does business. But I genuinely do believe, like, when you go back and you just examine people case by case who were presidents, I think Jimmy Carter was probably among the top, 3 most moral, ethical humans to ever hold the office. But policy-wise, he deked us bad.
So any sales of arms to Iran would have been considered illegal. The Reagan administration...
Yeah, but if we're breaking our own embargo, that's different, right? Like, are you gonna arrest yourself? No. And hey, we just went into Venezuela and yoinked Maduro. Like, was that illegal? Probably. Is anybody gonna do anything about it? No. Laws only have power if they're enforceable, and they're only enforceable if you have adequate military or economic power behind the enforcement to carry out the threat of punishment. That's it. That flat out, that's what it is. That's why international law does not apply to, it does not apply to America. It does not apply to China. It does not apply to Russia. And you could argue that there's a couple more nations as well. It doesn't matter because they literally cannot enforce the law. So yeah, like if we broke our own embargo, it's like, okay, cool, we're gonna sanction ourselves $0. Fuck it.
He sold arms to Iran anyways in order to fund the Contras. The weapons, of course, would be exchanged for hostages that were being held by Hezbollah. And mentioning the Contras, because of course they have to,
Hassan Piker's
the Reagan
best friend,
administration
Hezbollah.
really wanted to fund them, and they were They were not great people.
No.
Sometimes
Yeah.
terror is very productive. It's okay, guys. It's okay when we fund terrorism. Yeah, if
Yeah.
you look into the little details of everything, it gets really confusing, like how Spain gave weapons to both sides. The UK was actively giving chemicals to Saddam Hussein to make chemical weapons, while also simultaneously
Jeez.
giving chemical weapons defense equipment to Iran. It makes zero sense. And yes, you see this correctly. Israel
No, it
was
makes perfect sense, right? It's a bunch of, brown people that the West doesn't care about. It's like having like your enemy and your enemy's enemy who's also your enemy, and they're not your friend. So you just go, fuck it, we're gonna sell to both sides, and we're gonna make bank off of it. Like that's all that it is. These aren't gifts. They're not just giving these away. They're selling them, right? I mean that was a huge part of why. Well, I mean, America, I don't think ever sold in World War I. I don't think we sold anything to the Axis powers, but when we didn't join the war until 1917, but we were benefiting economically. So while we're selling like munitions and arms and equipment and boats and like all this stuff, we're just manufacturing our butts off, selling it to the Allied powers, and at the same time Europe was literally bombing itself into second place, and that's when American dominance shone through. That was a huge accelerating factor for America's economy becoming the #1 economy in the world. Europe destroyed its own infrastructure at the same time that they were pumping money into America to buy arms and weapons to continue to bomb each other and destroy each other's infrastructure. And then it doubled down, and it happened again in World War II. And that's where one of the greatest defenses of America is the fact that we are so much more powerful than anybody else in our hemisphere, and we have the most powerful navy ever, and we have 2 oceans between us and anybody who could potentially put up a fight, right? And we haven't had to deal with that, where when you're in London, you can literally tell which buildings were destroyed, which it was most of them, which had been rebuilt after the Battle of Britain or the bombing of Britain from World War II, and which ones weren't, because of the height of door frames and the width of door frames and super narrow staircases, because as nutrition and different things happened, got better, these buildings that had been built 200 years before, or like during the Victorian era, they were the average height of a man was 5'5" or something, right? 5'6", 5'7", and then nowadays it's 5'9", 5'10", right? And that's global. Obviously those numbers shift a lot based on specific countries, but if you're walking around a building that's kind of old and you can comfortably fit through everything, and you're just like, oh yeah, this is like a standard door, this is like a standard staircase, this is a standard frame, that building was built after the Battle of Berlin, or the bombing of Berlin. Versus if you're like, man, this is kind of tight in here, like like kind of low roofs, like whatever, it's like, yeah, that was a building that managed to not get flattened, so it never got rebuilt, so it was built with the previous average height and weight and whatever in mind.
supporting Iran.
I don't even know how I got on that. I'm so sorry. That's a tangent. Okay, 37 minutes recording. We're 11 and a half minutes in.
What a fucking world
my
we live in
God.
right now. Now, if I were to go into detail about all of this, I would probably be sitting here for the
selling
next
arms,
couple
that's
hours,
how,
but I don't think that's really necessary. But yes, all of this massive support for both sides ended up accumulating in pretty much nothing. Hell, I'd
Yeah.
argue that this massive proxy war, as I'm pretty much just going to refer to it as,
No, it
led
was.
to many of
It
the
was.
conditions that the Middle East faces today, including Saddam Hussein's motivation to invade Kuwait, starting the Gulf War. As for Iran, the revolution remained intact, and the war left the Islamic Republic in the same political state that it is today. The conclusion to the conflict feels just very weird and ironic, I guess, considering the relations that Saddam Hussein would have with the West later on, as well as the relations with Iran and the West later on. It's just, wow, a lot of this just has not aged very well, has it? I mean, come on. I mean, when would the U.S. ever back any political faction that would bite them later in the ass.
No, that never happens.
But yeah, looking into this war a little bit more for historical perspective was pretty awful. Seeing the amount of reports that were made concerning chemical attacks and human wave attacks and the use of child soldiers, it's just not very great to look through. Anyhow, this was my first attempt at covering a historical topic. Of course, this was requested by Gas Mask, so thank you for the donation that was made a while ago for a PC build that I should have delivered on a while ago, but sorry about that. Anyhow, I might try my hand more at this kind of content, so I guess I'll see what I do next time.
Huh. So, part of the request for this was to discuss, apparently the person bringing up Israelis supporting Iran in the conflict. Quote from Turn to the Enemy of My Enemy is My Friend. But they didn't really discuss, I mean, they discussed Western powers, right? Which, you know, that typically would include Israel, because Israel's usually viewed as, you know, it's a sovereign nation, but it is also almost a Western pseudo-colonial outpost in the Middle East. You know, not to say that they are owned or they own anybody else, you know, but I think that's fair to say. In my mind, it's tricky, right? Where Israel and Israeli support, like if you look at Iran pre-revolution under the Shah, you know, they were it was a monarchy, but there were, you know, constitutional monarchy aspects to it, democratic aspects to it. There were, it wasn't like an authoritarian regime in the sense that, you know, something like what we typically view as like Saddam Hussein, al-Assad, Gaddafi. Like, you know, we think of strong men and, you know, subjugating forces, like that kind of a deal. So I'm gonna try to get more information, because, you know, this was the video that was linked, and maybe there's like a follow-up, or maybe there's something in the comments. But yeah, no description. Oh, this isn't even the right. Where did the... Right there. Yeah. Oh, did they take the video down? Content isn't available, or did they repost it under a different... Yet another bribe, this time for historical Queen Seraphine. What the hell?
Since I mentioned earlier that the
One thing that we would like to say, or in
counterbalance a little detail, it's just a cool topic. Of course,
So
this
who's
was
this
requested by
person?
Gas Mask, so
Oh, they have blue sky. That's a red flag. Oh, sorry, here. They have blue sky. What? Okay, now I'm just confused. Like, did they take the original video down? Because this is the video I just watched, but it had a different... Yeah, maybe they did. Maybe it got flagged or reported or something. Huh. But anyway, you know, I mean, if I'll try to find like a mirror or a re-upload or something of this one. I'm gonna keep this recording and probably still post it just because it is interesting and I do want to do a follow-up. You know, like the Iran-Iraq war was just one of those things that in history class, right? Like I probably only ever read about it in like a general overarching textbook that had like a heading and then maybe like 2 body paragraphs, right? I think that's probably what most Americans, that's, you know, unless they were alive during that time, you know, if they're, you know, in their 50s or 60s and they actually remember like news broadcasts and stuff. I would imagine that that's like 90% of the typical Americans is actually Khomeini.
Dala Kamani.
See, but then it works there. That's so weird. Yeah, let me. I'm gonna figure this out, and then I'll revisit this. Very odd. It's definitely weird. Queen Historiana, which it's like I don't think she just did like a re-upload, right? Like you'd get taken down. Yeah. So I'm gonna end it here. We'll look at that, but I do want to do more of a deep dive just because it's an event in history that I personally have not too much experience with, and anything that I don't know, I try to make it my business to know. So with that, I'm going to end the recording.